Good morning, good evening for our global partners around the world joining us. This is Jake Cunningham. I hope you're doing well this Friday morning here, Eastern Time, actually afternoon. What we're moving into today with the assistance and actual guidance of our coach, William James Cunningham, quantum master, founder, owner, co-founder of White Dove Healing Arts, and specialist with the doctor recommends and complex Nelsonian homeopathy. We're going to get into now some of the calibration and the test.
Now, thank you for having me, Jake. I appreciate being able to share some of the things that I've learned over the years. So we're going to talk about some of the early days here first, Jake, and we're talking about the calibration process. The calibration process, if you have a little formula, folks, you can write it down. Higher calibration equals higher probability. Now, that's the whole purpose of calibrating, or you can say it this way. How about creating an electroenergetic handshake with the patient? Creating a cybernetic loop between you and the computer, or the patient and the computer, I should say, the adductor, indigo, skio, whatever you have. So the idea is to create the two-way street. Now, this is a unique method of objectivity of testing versus doing muscle testing, pendulums, or even the old EAV point probes. So this is a whole new concept in testing people, and you may, hopefully you're maybe 5-6 feet away from them. I don't approve of the people sitting next to the computer and doing the work. You should have your own screen for the client and a chair a ways away, and you should be over here, as I am, 6 or 7 feet away from the client. Now they're going to see the same screen I see. They have a big screen, big color TV screen, and a nice comfortable leather and wood chair, no metal, please. So we want a cybernetic loop. We want an electroenergetic handshake between you and the adductor. That way we have the two-way street going, where we're getting data for wellness measurement, and then we want data and frequencies, friendly frequencies, going out the other direction for enhanced wellness. So notice now we're not using any diagnose, treat, cure words here. We're using measuring and enhancing wellness concepts. So not the idea of death care, but wellness enhancement. So in the early days, when we first created the occlusion device, way back in 1989, when it was first registered with the FDA under a 510K market approval registration, devices are registered under the Health and Human, the US of the good old USA. That's a wing and a branch of the FDA, by the way. That's where the devices get registered. So anyway, the old occlusion device, the primary one, first of all, students, compared to your 12,000 items in your test kit nowadays, you had maybe 1,500 items. Or you could say it this way: words to speak to the client with and words for the client to speak to you with. That's the way it worked. Now, in that day and age, 1989, 1990, I spent the first 3 years of the 90s with Dr. Nelson through 92. We were thinking about probably we were getting about 80% accuracy in the wellness measurement. Now, again, we don't use the word diagnose, do we? So next we had a system called the QXCI, the Quantum Zeroid Consciousness Interface System. That was the second generation of the device. And Professor Nelson thought we were getting 85% or so correctness in our measurement of wellness. Then we went on to the famous SKIO, where at that point in time, Professor Desi thought we were probably around the 90th percentile. And at that point, the test kit, of course, had kept expanding to 3,000 items, then 6,000 items, then 8,000 or 9,000 items. Now we come to the adductor, where we are looking at probably a 95th percentile of accuracy in measuring and being able to enhance the body electric. So again, the word eductor, as Dr. Nelson likes to tell us to say it, eductor, is the idea of a deeper, broader, wider measurement of the body electric, and a deeper, broader, wider enhancement, education of the body electric. The eductor word is the root word for education, the root word for doctor, which means teacher, etc. So now we are up into the 12,000 plus items in the test kit. Well, in that case, we must enhance the ability to measure the body electric. So we're looking at the 95th percentile. Now that's where you should be calibrating to. Now it says on our calibration screen here, as you can see, we will go into calibration, that it's okay to measure from 85th percentile on. In other words, if you get 85%, you can do it. But knowing the history of this now and the development of the software, the development of the hardware, the ingenious things that Professor Desi has put into these newer systems, Indigo, Skio, Eductor, we want to get to that higher calibration percentage. And that's all that word calibration means. It's kind of a strange word to the client. So you just want to more or less define that. And again, in your mind's eye, higher calibration equals higher probability. The higher probability of what? Of getting proper, real info from the subconscious, unconscious mind, the body electric. Not the word brain mind, not the Newtonian concepts. And of course, as Jake went over last week with you, the way to really enhance that is to, again, using Professor Desi's own words, stir up the unconscious mind, bring things up to the surface for the device to measure more accurately by not being a dumb, lazy butthead, but by being a smart practitioner and doing the SOC index. Okay? I know there's a love-hate relationship with that little piece of software, but let's be good practitioners and get that unconscious mind stirred up. That also enhances the accuracy of the device too. So that's the reason. Now, secondly, when we get to the calibration page, as you can see, we have the ability to shift to the virtual channel. That means there are no electrical signals coming out of the hardware, the software, the hardware, into the patient via the head, wrist, and ankle bands. A good case for that would be your consent forms and on your sheets of paper that you have people fill out before they come into your office. We hope you're doing it that way, so you can sort of screen people. You want to ask them, do you have any type of robotics in the body? Initially, the first question was, many years ago, was, do you have a pacemaker? Well, if you do, then yes, you can still test the person, but you want to shift it to the virtual channel so you do not foul up the beats per second or the hertz frequencies of the pacemaker. Nowadays, students, there's many more robotics being put into the human body. Chips and things that operate the bladder better and all kinds of weird stuff. So really, that should be a question you should ask. And if there is such a device into the human being, body, brain, heart, wherever it may be these days, you don't even know, then shift to the virtual channel. You're preserving the accuracy, of course. Now, one time, Jake and I were riding with Professor Nelson from Cancun over to Cozumel, where my son Joey was married. He attended the wedding there. And we asked him, what do you think the difference is in accuracy of wellness measurement, not the word diagnose? And he said, probably maybe a 2% difference. It virtually versus doing it with the harness on. However, on to say, the big difference was the 400 to 800% more enhancement of the frequencies from the harnesses or the biofeedback programs. And I guess we're not supposed to use the word therapy, but you know what I'm saying. So in that case, in a tough case, as he went on to say, try to get the people in the chair if you can. If not, don't worry about a lack of diagnostic accuracy or wellness measurement accuracy, because I can use the word diagnose if I'm talking to some of the doctors here with medical licenses. But most of us do not have that. So that's the idea. So now when you do the fast track calibration, that's an enhancement over the older devices too. So let's just shift to the virtual channel. And since we have a test case in here today, now again, earlier on my lectures, I've given you some of the ideas of practicing when you're first starting, the value of getting people in the harness if you can. Jake, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, very good. And then also in subspace, you're not going to lose accuracy in wellness measurement. You're just not going to have the efficacy of the harness intervention when you're doing some of the biofeedback programs. Now, this is not to say that subspace programs, biofeedback programs, or therapies are ineffective. Relatively 400 to 800% more effective in the harness. You all have had amazing results from doing subspace therapies, I'm sure, and I sure have over the years. So it's relative to that, and actually you can really put somebody on the couch subspace if you do too many of them, that's for sure. So now we're going to carry on the idea of the virtual versus the electrical. Here we are. Now, if, for instance, if someone had to get up and go to the bathroom, you can also shift to virtual. And then when they get back in the chair, you get the harness back on them. Electrical test reset. So now you're back to electrical signals coming out of the harness. So you can go back and forth on this if you need to. But the most common use of it is doing subspace on the phone or getting somebody in the chair. Now, if you don't want to give a whole 1-hour lecture on quantum mechanics and non-local reality, etc., you can take the information. Yes, I have a pacemaker. Okay, you've got the harness on, etc., but you know that there's no signals coming out. Other than that, you just have to carry on. Unless you know the person well enough, then you can kind of explain, hey, you know, this works on subspace. I'll tell you a little bit about it, etc. Now, the other information I have experienced on using virtual is in epileptic patients. And I have, early in my day, triggered an epileptic seizure by using the harness in full electrical test reset mode. So then again, if you're getting the child with the seizures or the, be careful of that. Doing long distance, virtual, no problem with that, not upsetting the seizure issue there. So now that's enough of that. So let's go fast track this. So now, what are the first 3 electrical signals or vectors that we're trying to work with here? Well, we can see up here, it's the profound significance of the trivector field. It's the voltage, amperage, resistance. Now, as you can see, when you're calibrating students, there's 9 more electrical hookups via the head harness, wrist, and ankle bands. But this is the primary one. Now, going back in history, the old occlusion device, all it did was hook up on the voltage, amperage, resistance. There weren't the extra channels. Now, down here on your screen, you can see the other 9. You're getting the voltage signal from the head harness. The frontal lobe of the brain is producing a voltage signal. Now, you're also measuring the resistance in the meridian systems on the wrist and ankle bands. Now, you're wrapping this harness around some of the classic measurement points for acupuncture points, the Tsing points, etc. And then you're calculating amperage. So if voltage equals amperage times resistance, if you know the voltage from the head harness, frontal lobe of the brain, and you know the resistance from the meridian channels, you can calculate mathematically the amperage. And as we know, the amperage is an indicator of the electrical capacity of the body, or the capacitance, and it's talking about the brain and the central nervous system, serotonin production, or you could talk about generally the life force, the chi or the ki. And Hahnemann talked about that, the life force in nature, the life force in the human being. So here you are. Now, brag about the adductor, as I continually like to do, but again, one of the reasons I like it is that it will usually get up to these higher calibration ratios much quicker than having to search and clear the field anomalies. You should have some idea of what's being told to you by what shows up in this box up here. This is the least offensive of the geopathic stressors. It's where water lines cross and causes a left spin. And then, of course, that affects some people. It's a common one to see, as you all know. There's other ones. The St. George grid would indicate some possible sugar regulation issues. The Hartmann grid, if that shows up, the Hartmann cross, that indicates generation or aging. And the ley cross would simply mean, again, some landline disturbances. So those are some other information pieces you might want on your workup sheets. And if you like mine version of it, you can call the girls and they'll send it to you. And you'll see all the important stuff you need to write down on a single 8.5 by 11 page. You don't need reams of paper to get the case noted and told to you by good filling in the blanks. So we have 95% here. Now, let's talk about some other things here, Jake, too. We're going to the test matrix, and we're going to do a little bit of talk about how are we test matrix data. Well, first of all, we have to understand the law of reactivity. And we're just going to go over here and get this. Now, I want to share something with you folks here. I don't know how these things happen other than just giving God the glory for divine timing. It was my last client last night that we did on the subspace from Alabama. This is a good old boy, blue-collar guy, 6'4", 230 pounds, blue-collar worker, worked in the building industry, the construction industry, many years of his life. Well, one of his issues was sort of a consumptive respiratory fatigue issue. And now, I never asked him what he was doing with his life, his work, before I saw what showed up here. Okay, so here we are at the top of the chart of reactivities. Out of 12,000 things, this guy puts the doctor recommends asbestos detox isode formula right up on the very first thing. Notice also, student, the older version of it, the New Vistas remedy called asbestox, is here too. So I asked him about that, and he said, oh yes, many years ago in the construction industry, I worked for many years where we were cutting asbestos board with a power saw, and whatever that showed up. Now, I knew nothing about this. He told me later after I saw this. And so, again, I'm totally amazed at this device. Now, why did we get this kind of accuracy? Well, first of all, we did a good SOC index to stir up the unconscious mind so they can report in accurately when they're doing the zeroid test. Also, using the law of reactivity, we know that the human being is set to do three things. It's set to say yes, no, and I don't know. Yes, no, and maybe. Dr. Nelson built this device, the way Desi continues to improve it, is to use what he built into it from the very beginning, a logic system. In the human condition, we are not perfect, but if we can enhance the probability of life's events up into the 95th percentile, like we can with the adductor, then we can get some pretty good darn information, pretty good accuracy. Now again, because again, we as human beings are running around daily in our lives saying yes, no, and I don't know. It's not the 100th percentile like the creator of all things is omniscient, 100% accurate, 100%. So that's the idea here. Your device is no longer a binary logic system. The minute your software from Budapest or from an authorized person loaded into a binary logic system computer, your computer now has become an artificial intelligence piece with trinary logic. Why? Because it's matching and doing an energetic handshake, you might say, with the trinary logic system in the human being. Yes, no, and I don't know. So here again, just as of, this was my last client I did last night. I finished at 4:45 Denver, Colorado time. And right off the bat, asbestos. I mean, this just blew my mind completely. Now, this guy had no clue what we were doing. I tried to explain things to him. He was a good old boy. He got it. He understood it at a certain point in the time. But I told him, I said, this is why this is such an amazing system. And of course, we see the lymph system issues here too. So now the basic idea is the law of reactivity working for you, students and practitioners, if you're going to fire up the device and use it at its most proficient level. And that is taking the data in, doing the SOC index, explaining a little bit about the two-way street, the energetic handshake, the cybernetic loop, etc., and just simply educating the person on simply intending to send information to the device. Now, we talk about an intention and attention, things like that. Well, it's the practitioner doing that also, along with the client. So now, before the test starts, what I tell the person was what Professor Nelson told me to tell them. Be still, but not stiff, no talking, and gently intend to send information to the adductor. Now, no efforting, no trying, no struggling, but just kind of mulling over some of your health issues that you told me about earlier. And again, with no effort. So that's what brings us to things like this when we see not only formula. Now, this is a general lung cleaning remedy. It shows up for a lot of other people, but in this case, this gentleman completely told me, yes, I worked with asbestos. You can use it and you'll see it show up for other cases of just general lung support and lung cleansing. But in this case, it was definitely, the center of the bullseye of the case. And here again, showing the old version of it. When you see the remedy show up on the same top 40 of 12,000 things, then you know that the law of reactivity, which is knowing how God-given ability to be good for you and away from things that are not. That's how the shark finds its food, how the swallows of Capistrano know where to go in the winter, why the squirrels start hiding nuts in the fall. All of that stuff is built in from the divine creator of all things and all people and all sentient and non-sentient things. So that's really the key to this thing, students, is to use your devices to their max, knowing and understanding what's going on here. Now, the interpretation of the matrix is really important. Keep in mind, if you go over here to some of our little reports, this is what you need to be clear about. And this is something you can safely and legally print for people, and I'll just read it to you. So this has to do with the interpretation of the data. This device is a biofeedback multimedia system designed for stress detection or stress therapy, or stress reduction, you could say it that way. The device cannot and does not diagnose any disease other than stress patterns are only pre-diagnostic. Only a licensed diagnostician can diagnose a patient. This device is a tool for stress diagnosis and therapy. The reactivity probability, here's the key to this disclaimer. The reactivity probabilities of disease listed by the device need to be confirmed by a licensed diagnostician. The device does not diagnose disease, it lists reaction scores. So the reaction scores are what we're looking at. Now, the theory in the test matrix, the interpretation of it, is the higher the reactivity to something, the higher the probability. Now, earlier we talked about calibration numbers equals higher probability, or you could say higher accuracy in the probability analysis. It's another way to say it, just a little longer. So what you're looking at here is people moving towards things that are good for them, such as the remedy called the kidney remedy, the lymph remedy. Here again is lymph sarcode, lymph liquescent, whatever you want to call it, etc. So you're seeing things moving towards, or let's say it this way, resonating with some things that are good for the person. Oxytocin, the bonding chemical in the brain, it's an opioid peptide. It's in the G-liquotrophic, by the way. And then some of these things, now, does the person want to move towards more depression? I probably think not. Does a gentleman want more iron in the blood? That's what kills the guys earlier, too much iron in the blood. The women getting so they live longer. etc. So you can go down here and simply look at things in 3 ways, not 2 ways. So really now we have to think about our trinary logic system. We have to think that this person said yes, yes, yes to certain things, like this guy right here. Yes to kidney, yes, whatever. No to things like depression, too much blood in the iron, and injuries, etc. But where's the I don't know and the maybe factors? It's all mixed in here. So even looking at the top 40, you're going to say, gee, there's this whole chart in front of me that's I don't know, no, gee, what, why I missed that one? Ooh, how do I answer that question? Blah, blah, blah. So the no and the yes, no, and the maybes or the I don't knows are mixed in here too. But if you've gotten your calibration ratios up to that high 95th percentile, then you can count on 95% of this stuff vital information. And this is just a mind-blowing example of my last client last night at 4:45 Colorado time. So Jake, that's really about all I have to say. Unless there's questions, I'd be glad to answer some. But I hope that helps the students not only understand and do a better job with their clients, but also have a great appreciation and gratitude towards our innovator, Professor Desiree, my good friend, Dr. William Charles Nelson.
Well,
okay.
Excellent, Dad. Thank you for that. You really hit the nail on the head, helping explain not only the quick, see, in the calibration, there's a few buttons to push, that's it. But to have an understanding of why and what those scores mean, as well as setting the virtual channel and when to do that and when not to. That's the answers I couldn't have provided. That's not my role nor my expertise. Dad, thank you for that. That is critical, as well as interpreting this massive body of data, which is really, I call it the most subjective, it's really the most subjective element of this system. As objective as the test and calibration and that reactivity test is, the interpretation is the subjective part. And that, the little words of wisdom you brought forth and reminded us of, is exactly why I wanted to have you on. Thanks, Dad. Appreciate it.
Sure, Jake. Is there any questions? I don't see them on my screen.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I'll just read them. Hi, Jean. How are you? And hello, Sue. Hi, Yvonne. Hi, Monique. Welcome, everybody. When you speak of robotics, do you include non-metals?
Non-metals.
I don't know exactly. When you speak of robotics.
Okay. Well, usually a robotic will have some type of metal in it because of the conductivity needed in the electrical exchange of the robotic. So usually you can't get any electrical signals going through plastics or rubbers. So most likely the robotics, at some part of them, there is some metal. Even a stent in the heart aorta, again, is made out of a mesh or a metal. So yeah, so just really, we don't have to get that detailed, but just ask them, do you have any robotics in the body, like pacemakers, things to help the bladder work better, et cetera, et cetera. There's all kinds of them these days. So that should be a question asked on your intake form, students.
Yeah, and Jean, thank you, Dad. And Jean actually clarified, which makes more sense with her first question. What she meant was actually, so do you include non-metals, and including what she meant was like plastics, because a lot of the implants now are those, well, they're plastic or similar material to those different plastics instead of the, strictly metals, like do you include those in the?
Yeah, I would say it this way. Whether they have metal or not, Gene, if they're functioning to supporting an organ system somehow, and they could be fouled up by the electrical signals from the harnesses, better safe than sorry, and use the virtual channel.
Yeah, and I stated that even in the manual. I got a e-doctor out the other day, this week, Dad, for a client, for Anna, who's local there, which we're going to look forward to support. If you're on, yes. Anna,
5 minutes from me here.
Yeah. And so I was reading through some of I print out a bunch of startup, just getting started manuals, things like this. Not a lot, Dad, but some paperwork. So people open the package, they get to read how to put things together and some basic safety. And this comes from the manufacturer. And they do say to, use precaution with pacemakers, and it's not intended for use with pacemaker. And I haven't heard of a case, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dad, regarding anybody having an issue with a pacemaker, but I still believe it's a rule of thumb that we just go by, and that way we'll prevent any cases. And I think a lot of it's liability, preventative approach to that.
Mm-hmm. It goes back, students, where Professor Nelson worked with a client one day, and they did have a pacemaker, and he went ahead and calibrated in full harness mode, and there was no problem. But afterwards, he was just like crossing his finger and saying, oh, nothing happened. And then instituted that rule about, if there is a pacemaker or something like it, go to the virtual channel. So it was from his own experience where nothing bad happened. But again, because he's a good guy and a scientist and wants to install that concept. So
I look at it like this too. The subtle actual frequency production of the system, it's so subtle and sensitive. We get bombarded by more EMF pollution probably every day. You're probably getting more by sitting in front of your computer right now. I hate to say it. Now that's just I'm not an expert. I won't make that claim, but think about the bombardment we get from our cell phone, laptop, going through the airport, flying in an airplane. So take it with a grain of salt in terms of what I'm stating in terms of that claim. But without our rule of thumb with our system is that if you got a pacemaker or any implantables, that you use the virtual channel. Keep it simple, keep it safe. Now there's some comments here, Dad. I want to first mention Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer says she loves your admiration of Desi. She is so much more extraordinary than most people know. Amen to that. Christine, hi, Christine, my teammate. She always helps me on these calls, Dad. She's great. Yes, Jennifer, Desi William has and continues to do so much more than what we can imagine, and she truly works hard for us.
Yep,
great.
That's true. And also, Jake, I want to say again, if we look back now, William Nelson and I have the same first name. So William is an old Teutonic name, which means resolute protector. So one reason Desi said, be careful of the pacemakers, is he's trying to protect us from any legal issues that could come about from somebody having a issue in the harness, in the chair, with a pacemaker or robotic while we were doing a session on them. So that's the other idea too. It's just a good idea, better safe than sorry, etc. Any other questions there, Jake?
No, just a couple of thanks. John and Robin say thanks. Christine she placed the Facebook ask and you shall receive, or ask and reveal is the name. Ask and it will be revealed is the name of the Facebook group. Check that out because Desi answers questions direct, you guys. You can go right to the source now with some of these communication channels. And we're going to get Desi on here this month. I talked to her the other day, Dad. And
hey, great.
We're going to get Desi on. You guys can both join us. Have a little reunion there. Sandra mentioned this. My husband has a pacemaker, and I was concerned about running him on the device. What I have been doing is having him place his hand on top of the device and running him that way, probably with a Skio or Indigo, as I imagine, with the test plate there. Do I understand that I can use the harness, the headband, work subspace with him hooked up? I don't.
Oh, okay, I can clarify that.
Yeah.
What I was saying there is, let's say this is a brand new patient comes in and you don't want to give a half-hour lecture on quantum physics, subspace, non-local reality, the power of prayer, etc. So you can really use the harness as sort of a, what do I want to say?
Oh, well, a placebo in a way.
Well, like a placebo, yeah, that's the idea. But knowing, because if you say, no, you're going to give all this information to the computer just by sitting here and, doing a Spock type thing, a mind meld.
Right.
No, you're not going to talk like that. So yeah, if it's your husband, don't even bother putting the harness on. Yeah, you're going to be taking in information from a hand on the test plate. That's for sure. But really, the test plate is not really active during a zeroid test. So really, just have them sit there without the harness and just information to the adductor on subspace, and you're just going to get frighteningly accurate information. So the only time the test plate would be valuable is if you're testing medicines and doing inversions and doing allergy work and stuff like that. So you're really not, the test plate is not taking in data as would the harness, head, wrist, and ankle bands. So forget that process too. Just have them sit down and relax.
Got it. So you were saying that, and this is a big, if somebody isn't up to the, let's just say, open enough to be able to sit there, bite their tongue, and go along with the flow at the very least, these may be clients you may not want to have anyway. But to save time, to go into someone who may not understand this and may not be a believer of this work because of this being new to them, you may be able to get right to the session crux quicker by just setting them up, so on. First time. Yeah, I get it. I hope everyone else.
The idea of the placebo, the word placebo, Jake, is probably the best word to use here, because there's then you're preserving credibility by putting the harness on, etc. Try to convince them that they're going to send information like mind melding, like Spock does. So that's the way to do it. Well, any other comments there from the folks? I'd be glad to answer things, or else I'll scoot off and get some juice.
Yeah, the voice, it's perfect timing. Your voice is coming in and out for some of the people. So I can hear you clearly, which means that at least the recording will be clear. But there are a couple other comments I just want to address real quick about the use of the chair. That's something I'm going to reach out and get a couple users who are using it to do an actual focus on how you set up, use, and apply the cybernetic chair. So we're not going to get into that today, but if any of you have questions about the chair, about updating your system, upgrading your software or your hardware, trading in, purchasing new, have a referral, send them my way. This is how I make my living. I don't make my living by the focus call. This is my passion. I love to connect and share wisdom. I make my living by actually helping sell and implement this into the world. I need your help. Send them my way. Come my way, and I will take care of you or any referral you send. That's how I have to grow, and I'm looking forward to a really exciting new year. There's a great promotion. I'm going to be sending out an email later today. It'll be in your inbox. Check it out, at least for your awareness. And other than that, Dad, I love you, man. Thanks for stepping up and just providing some amazing wisdom for us. Sorry about the technical difficulties, everyone, but thanks, Dad. Any closing words?
Well, also, students, regarding the kind of the teamwork that Jake and I have always had together as father and son and practitioner and marketer, what we've done that really seems to help some of the people interested is if Jake refers someone to me to demonstrate this thing. Now, you can see we can do all these things on either GoToMeeting or the system Jake uses here. If somebody's demonstrated this properly in the beginning and can get excited about it and can be coming from a shared experience from a practitioner who's done it for 25 years, don't worry someone to us as a team. We will take darn good care of them. Of family, the White Dove Global family, they are precious to us because, again, that's how we've provided for our families over the 25 years too. So they will be taken care of well. And once they get a good demonstration, they can be anywhere in the world if they have GoToMeeting, and they can see every screen that you guys are seeing right now too. Or even better, if they're here locally, like our friend Anna is 5 minutes from me here. She just came over and sat down for a couple hours. So you can do that, Jake. So that's good. Well, listen, I'm going to sign off and go get a little lunch here. Jake, do you need?
No, I appreciate you, Dad. Have a great afternoon, and I'll chat with you this weekend.
Okay, students, God bless you guys, and have a nice, happy, and blessed holiday with your families and friends.
Thank you, Dad. Love you. Bye-bye.